If you're a fan of the New York Jets and you don't know why Trever Siemian isn't starting at quarterback, that's okay. But if you're the head coach of the New York Jets and you don't know why Trever Siemian isn't starting at quarterback, that's not okay. And people are going to have some questions. I'm Glenn Naughton with Jet Nation Radio and JetNation.com. Be sure to log into JetNation.com where you can register and become a part of what is the most active Jets message board on the web. So, Jets head coach Robert Saleh, I saw some tweets yesterday about this interview we did on ESPN Radio. Michael Kay, Don LaGreca, and Peter Rosenberg. They had some hard questions for Saleh. Straight, direct. Kay said, "Look, this isn't personal. Not trying to. We appreciate that you come on every week. You don't have to." But after Saleh had said a few minutes earlier that the offense, it's been the same story for 3 years. The offense not producing. Michael Kay says, "Well, Zach Wilson's the one constant. Why don't you start Trever Siemian?" He said, "Explain to me." Kay made it clear. I'm not pretending to be a coach or a guru or an X's and O's guy, but just as a fan, tell me why Trever Siemian isn't getting a shot over Zach Wilson. And Salah's answer was surprising. Salah's answer was, I don't know. You don't know. I mean, if you don't know, then who does? Because this team right now has a lot of problems. And here's the thing. People are going to say, "Oh, but Glenn, you're reversing course now. You said Zach Wilson was getting better." Listen, I addressed this a couple weeks ago on our show. And me and Chris Schubert joked about it, that how there are so many things going on with the Jets right now where two things can be true at the same time. And that's the case with Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson is getting better or has gotten better. True. That still may not be good enough. Also true. So that's why the Jets have to look at everything. But you're not getting any new receivers in here tomorrow who are going to make a significant upgrade. The trade deadline's gone. That ship has sailed. You blew it in the offseason when you didn't sign DeAndre Hopkins. You blew it in the draft when you didn't take a wide receiver with your first pick. And you blew it at the trade deadline when you didn't try to get a guy like Hunter Renfrow. And I talked about this the other day. But Glenn, the Raiders weren't picking up the phone. You could have used Hunter Renfrow a month ago. Don't talk to me about by trade deadline day, the Raiders weren't answering the phone. They had nailed him to the bench weeks ago. You could have gotten Hunter Renfrow last month, and he would have helped this team. So you drop the ball with DeAndre Hopkins, you drop the ball on draft day, you drop the ball in Renfrow. Now the trade deadline's gone. Now you've got what you've got. You've got Garrett Wilson, who was a monster. You've got Alan Lazard. And you've got Xavier Gibson, an inexperienced Xavier Gibson, and an even less experienced Jason Brownlee. Malik Taylor's a guy who's, been on and off some rosters. I think he's going to see some playing time. He's one of the veteran guys of the group. But you drop the ball at receiver. At offensive line, I'm not going to kill the Jets for offensive line. I see people, and it's been going on for over a year now, and people keep saying this team won't address the offensive line. Won't address the offensive line. Mekhi Becton, first-round pick. Now, look, I'm not talking about whether or not all these moves were good because the Lake and Tomlinson one blew up in their faces. He's another one. Better than he was last year, still not good enough. Gave up 7 pressures, I believe, the other day. First rounder on Mekhi Becton. Big money on Lake and Tomlinson. Mistake, I get it, but it was addressed. You brought back Connor McGovern, and then you drafted Joe Tippmann. You added Wes Schweitzer. So you got 3 guys there, all who can play center, some who can play some guard. And then you brought back Dwayne Brown, which, again, was that a mistake? Possibly. But, again, Brown, you have to remember, when he was brought in initially, he was supposed to be a backup, but you brought him in, you had to give him bigger money in multiple years because you had him in for a visit, and then that day or the next day, Mekhi Becton gets hurt. So then Dwayne Brown's agent is like, cha-ching, we're going to need another year. We're going to need some more money. So to say they haven't addressed the O-line, and oh, by the way, IR, so I forgot about him, Elijah Vera Tucker. So you used a first on Becton, a first on AVT, a second on Tippmann, you signed Tomlinson, you brought in Brown, you brought in Schweitzer, you retained McGovern. You loaded up on the O-line. What you didn't know is that over the course of 2 years, one obviously for Tippmann, almost every one of these guys, with the exception of Tomlinson, was going to miss significant time, like years at a time, or 10, 11, 12 games a year. That's been the case with AVT. That's been the case with Becton. Tippmann just came back from an injury. Who knows how healthy he is? These guys can't stay healthy. So now you're down to your third and fourth string guys, which is when you get to Robert Turner, who gives up 9 pressures and 3 sacks or whatever the number was. So the receiver situation, you drop the ball. Such a bad job there. QB2, you drop the ball. Let's be honest. I said from the time, well before the season started, even though I acknowledge Zach improved, we shouldn't have found out if Zach improved. Zach should have been on the bench all year. QB2 should have been somebody like Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew, I would guarantee you this team is 6-2, 7-1 right now. If Gardner Minshew, that's how good this defense is. Just move the football. But right now, you've got a quarterback who is now we're starting to see a little bit of regression. But isn't that somewhat to be expected? Zach Wilson was pressured on 52% of his dropbacks against the Giants. They were credited with 31 pressures. And then this past week wasn't much better. So that guy who drops back too quickly, who runs from pressure that isn't there, now he's running from pressure that actually is there. And it's there a lot. So Zach Wilson isn't a player who's good enough to overcome everything falling apart around him. And that's not to say things have to be perfect. They just have to be workable. And this O-line, and the O-line's not workable. The receivers are not good. And that's why I don't want to hear about, his time from snap to throw. Look, before the All-22 was even available to anyone, we have people ripping this kid for how long he's holding on to the ball. Having just seen the week before that nobody's getting open. Was that the case again against the Chargers? I don't know. I'm going to watch the All-22 later today, regrettably. But we know nobody was open against the Giants. So yeah, if the protection's holding up, or if it's starting to crumble and he's having to use his legs to buy time, but there's still nobody open, and then you go, look, he took another sack. Right, because his alternative was throw an interception. So you have a guy who's playing conservatively and trying to not turn the football over with a bunch of receivers who can't get open and either backup/injured O-lineman. So Zach, listen, I'm not saying he's been good. I'm saying, let's take a look at Trever Siemian. Let's see how much of this really is just Zach. Because again, Siemian, superstar? No. Veteran who can manage an offense and get you in the end zone more often than he turns it over. And yeah, fine. He's won some games. Hasn't won a ton because he's played on some bad teams. When you're a backup quarterback on a bad team, you're going to get your starts are going to be few and far between. It's going to be with very little preparation. And you're not going to win a lot. His one start last year came against the Jets. Pretty damn good defense. Of course he lost that game. So Trever Siemian and his 35 career starts and his, 59% completion percentage. You ask Robert Saleh, why isn't he starting? And Saleh's answer is, I don't know. Well, I don't know that that's a good answer. It's not an answer Jets fans want to hear. So you've got the Raiders coming up next. A very winnable game facing a rookie quarterback with this defense. It might be 3-0. It might be 6-3, but it's a winnable football game. But to me, one of the most important takeaways from Robert Saleh saying he's not benching Zach Wilson and that there will be no changes is to think back to last year. Last season, when Zach Wilson played his worst football, Robert Saleh was asked if he was going to bench Zach Wilson. And Robert Saleh said that benching Zach Wilson was the furthest thing from his mind. And the next day, Robert Saleh announced that he was going to be benching Zach Wilson. So, Jets fans, I know we're all frustrated right now, and we should be. I know people want heads to roll, and they should. And I know people are freaking out because Robert Saleh just told us that Zach is still the quarterback. He is. But another game or two like that. I mean, the thing is, against the Raiders, it might be another game where you can endure a poor performance and pull off a win. They might be able to do that. But lose another game with another performance like that, and I think we've seen him do it before. We've seen Robert Saleh do immediate about faces. No, we are not benching this guy. It's not going to happen. Next day, he's benched. So Zach Wilson's got to play better. Everybody's got to play better. But Zach Wilson's got to do something to save his job because despite what Robert Saleh says, I would imagine his job is on the line, that being Zach Wilson once again. More tonight with myself, Chris Schubert, Dylan Terraman. Check us out. Like, subscribe, click the link, and you will get the notification tonight. We will be going live to talk about all of this and more. Plenty to go over. Have a good one, Jets fans.